Shane, how are you doing this morning?
I'm doing good. Had a good morning, got some hot cider. Got a cinnamon stick in there. It's nice.
Awesome, man. Well, I look forward to being able to see you later. I'm going to review it from the computer once we do it all over again. But as for now, I can't see you, so I'm just thinking about it, visualizing it in spirit. How does it taste?
It's really good. I got it. There's a local orchard that makes it, and me and a friend went there yesterday and got some cider and pie, and it's been nice to have in the morning.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, please introduce yourself to the audience. I know many people out there know who you are, but I would love to make sure everyone is conscious of your name and your handles, and just tell the audience a little bit about yourself.
Okay. Well, hi everyone. I'm Shane Alton, or online I go as The Wild Dryad. I'm a forager, illustrator, and I sometimes play music here and there. And I've been doing foraging and like stuff nature related for about 3 years now. So, little bit of experience with that. But around the Chicagoland area, I do foraging tours and do nature walks to help teach people learn about edible plants and mushrooms.
Awesome, man. And how did you get into foraging?
I think what with many people, I don't know if it's many people, but I think with some people who feel the need to want to go outside, I think there is some reconnection that I wanted to have with myself and wanting to be outside more. Um, and take a break from like the regular pace of things.
Hmm.
So I initially started with just wanting to learn about the plants that were in my yard.
Hmm.
I'm like, okay, let me just learn what's around me first, because there were some stuff I used to see people post on foraging, like things in the UK, and I'm like, wow, that looks really cool. How
Hmm.
do how do people do that? You can just go outside and pick things that like aren't in your store, and you can forage it. That's really cool. So I started doing personal research on my own. I would go outside and take notes and take pictures of the things that were just growing in my yard. Learn about those things first. The first things I was able to try, we have some sumac trees growing in our yard. So we tried sumac berries and June berries at a local like area downtown. And I'm like, okay, I tried things. I haven't died yet. What's something I can do, to get and enhance to make sure that I'm knowing what I'm doing? So I took some more nature walks around the area of other experts in the field who've been doing it for longer, learned some things from them, and made some connections to where now I'm able to do nature walks and teach other people what I've learned. And it's always comes from the perspective of me being a student. There's always new stuff to learn. I feel like this year I'm at a point now where I know 99.9% of the plants in this area, but I could go to a different state or a different area, and I feel like a beginner all over again. So there's always something new and fresh to learn in it, and it never gets old. I love it.
Hmm. Yeah, well, that's awesome, man. I'm really happy to hear that enthusiasm for nature and the outdoors. And the curiosity came from just wanting to reconnect yourself to your own space and increase your understanding of what's around you. That shows a kind of awareness and a level of presence that I really want to encourage more people to have. One of the reasons why I think a lot of people don't have that is because it takes a lot of time. Um, how much time would you say you have had to spend um, in the afternoons, in the mornings, throughout a week in order for you to absorb this kind of knowledge?
I think that's a great point to bring up. I think something I've bring sometimes and will forget to bring up on tours too is the fact that I technically should be a sophomore in college right now. But however, fortunately enough, I've been able to take a back seat, and I've taken a different route. I've gone to trade school for carpentry. Now, as opposed to having a regular schedule of a college student, it's freed me up to have a lot more time to focus on learning this. I'd say that this is something that I research every day. It varies between different amount of time between each day, but there's always something that I either go outside and I'm taking notes on things, I'm taking pictures, I'm recording things, I'm going back at home, I'm comparing and contrasting different books. And it doesn't feel old. It doesn't feel like a chore of having to learn. And I wouldn't really say there's nothing specific that I'll have a point of learning about in a given day. I'll just pick up something I've been liking recently. I'll pick up 2 or 3 books from the library or go to a thrift store and find different books that are nature related and compare and contrast information, see which ones that I like better, and then the stuff that I feel like, oh, that's interesting, or that relates to what I'm doing, I'll take notes, and then I'll go fact check between other books and reference it too. But I think
Go ahead.
I think one of the main driving things, though, has been lately that's helped me learn more has been this platform too, because so many people will have different questions that I don't know. And I'm like, okay, now I have to go back and research these things to make sure, okay. And it helps to give like different research points to help pad in a lot of the information that I may not know about.
Right. And so it sounds like you've been studying, absorbing information. I'm going to present a series of thoughts to the audience, and then I will go from there. I just want to make sure we're all on the same page. And so in terms of the terms, right? Yeah. Information is everywhere. It exists in everything. So if you stop and pay attention to anything, right, you can gain information from that thing. When you've gained the information, you have knowledge, right? That knowledge allows you to take with you the information you have and begin to apply it in your everyday experiences so that you can gain more understanding. So from information to knowledge to now applying it, you have understanding. Once applying it with understanding through experience, you gain wisdom. And with wisdom, you can share all of your understanding, knowledge, and how you got the information with others. What we've done in our society is we've created schools. Schools are really an idea that someone with a ton of wisdom is sharing their experience so that you can gain understanding, knowledge, and where they got their information. But there is still an important factor that the individual must be driven to learn, so that that individual being presented with where to get information can go get it, absorb it, turn it into knowledge, apply it as understanding so that they can then gain wisdom. You have been doing that for yourself, and you have been doing that in a way that has been propelling you forward because you've been driven to learn, and you've been sharing what you've been learning, and then people have been sharing that back with you, and it's been this really incredible process to watch, because that's what I think truly has been increasing your growth in such a way, your genuine desire to learn. And I wanted to make a point to talk about that for a moment, because right now you should be a sophomore in college, but we're having a conversation because of your desire to educate and propel yourself, not for just status, but for true understanding. And I think that is a message that many people need to embrace, not just for foraging, but for the fact that like that is a recipe for true growth, for true life blossoming experience.
Yeah, and I think just in that of like wanting to, in the case, I'll reference foraging, even though this can be something that can be applied to other things that people want to learn. I think there's a few things that can happen. Lately I've liked the idea that the difference between people who, or I was talking to, I can't remember. I think I was talking to my sister about this idea that there's sort of like three things going on in a given time, right? When you're learning something, there's the initial, I think, what was it? Beginners ask what. So they'll ask, like, what is this thing? It's like they don't have an understanding. They're just out seeking knowledge. Then an intermediate person will ask, okay, like, how? What is this? What are these things that we can do? So how does this work? So I understand what things are around me. How do I get these things to be able to understand them? And then the difference between a beginner and an expert, if you will, is someone who asks why. They understand it all. They've taken in everything around them. They understand the things that are in their given area. And then now they're asking why. So why do these things happen the way that they do? Which all of those questions, usually you ask those questions for all the different stages. But I argue maybe when you become more knowledgeable about a given subject, you start asking why. Why do these things? And you start questioning. The growth comes from the questioning. If you will, I think.
And I agree, and that's why I was just talking about this last night in a live. There can't be any progress without change, and when you begin to question, you begin to seek out the lens and the lanes that have created and laid the foundations for change. And so there are, and like everything in life, you must have discipline and moderation, right? Although we must question everything, if you question for the sake of questioning without ever stopping to think about what answers you've been given, well, then you'll never learn. And you're actually just creating a spiral that will actually pull more and more people down into a funnel. And so you want to question, but you want to make sure that you're taking notes on your questions so that you're pushing yourself forward and pushing those around you forward. That can only happen when you are asking the why and when you're looking around trying to understand for a greater purpose. Sometimes that greater purpose is the need to eat, right? Like the idea of learning can be driven by a kind of instinct, a kind of necessity. But again, in our world today, far too many of us are disconnected from our own understanding of our needs and our understanding of our community and our environment because we've applied no time towards learning about those things. And that's why I think the amount of people who are going outside like yourself to learn about what is actually around them is so important because all of a sudden you start to realize it's a really precious gift to have quality soil, to have quality plants, to have quality access to nature. It's a precious gift that we're all given by nature, but more and more of our places in the world are creating ideas which seems like it's difficult to access. Like those things are just so far away. Like that knowledge is not something you can have access to. But you're walking proof that it's abundant and that you can have access. You just have to apply yourself.
And I think an important thing with that too is that I really want to like pin the idea. I have been fortunate enough to learn at a rate that may be faster than other people. And there may be people who haven't experience who've been able to grow and learn about this, as example, with foraging or being outside with nature faster than I have. And everyone, I believe, has that ability to learn and gain that information. I think everyone has that in them, but a lot of the times either life kind of forces it out of you, with a lot of some of the struggles that happen, or people feel like they're not able to, or you have someone who hasn't been able to do that for themselves, push another person down to be able to get them to that point where they're able to go out and seek the information as well. And I really want to pin the idea that the information is accessible no matter what pace you're going at. For some people, if you're working like 12-hour days, like 5 days out of the week, but then you have you have a nice walk in the morning and you just take one picture of a tree and you're learning one thing out of the day, even though you're learning one tree a week, that's still growth to be able to apply yourself. You're delegating some time that you have to be able to learn it. It doesn't have to be, you know, sit down every day. I'm going to dedicate this amount of time to be able to do something. Now, in some cases, maybe you may need to have like maybe a little bit more focused time, but it doesn't have to be strict
Yeah.
schedule to be able to learn something.
I've said the same thing so many times about when someone's like, "Oh, how did you get to this place with so many plants? It must take so long to take care of them all." This is like, "Oh, I could never do that. I don't have a green thumb." Like, there's just so many times I hear people talk that way, and I'm like, "Oh, you really are cutting yourself off from the greater mountain. You don't jump the mountain. You don't skip over the mountain. Unfortunately, you're not a giant. We're not giants, right? So you have to walk up the mountain if you are to get to the top, right? You have to climb it. And how do you climb it? One movement at a time. And so start very small, wherever it is. Like you said, learn about just one thing. For me, it was just getting one plant. Get the one plant and look at the plant, learn about the plant. But that's why before I can encourage people to just look at the plant or to look at the tree or to look at the mushroom, I make sure I encourage them to look at themselves.
Mm-hmm.
And even if they're not really skilled at looking at themselves, or they're not the champion of their reality yet, I know that they can be, right? And I know that each one of us has the potential to be our own superhero in our own epic. But each one of us has to work on ourselves. And that's where I think my true gift is encouraging people to bring out their inner superhero by encouraging them to work on their mind, body, and spirit. And the moment they start to do that, the moment they even become aware that that's a thing to be done, well, when you insert the plant, when you insert the mushroom, when you insert the tree, all of a sudden these things have such a profound impact on the person in each place and each stage and each cycle that the tree, the mushroom, or the plant may be going through. And given that each one of those is so intricately connected in the forces of nature, when we sit in that trifecta and become a cornerstone, so that we add a point instead of taking away, we actually synergize ourselves and our environment. We become something so much more than just ourselves.
So just maybe I don't know. I don't want to oversimplify what you're saying. So by doing the inner work within, people are more able to connect themselves to the physical,
Absolutely.
if you will.
Absolutely.
So I have a question for you then on that point. I think, which we said with like learning before and how people learn at different stages with that. I'm curious, is I have observed that I feel like sometimes people will put emphasis on where they want to be and be stuck at the finish line of, okay, like I want to be able to be at this point spiritually, or I want to be able to own this like item at this point. And I've had experiences where I've like focused on the end goal of it and really not enjoy the process of getting there. And this is the only thing, foraging for me and with what I'm doing now, has been the only thing where I have goals in mind, but I'm not focusing on them. I'm genuinely enjoying the process of learning it.
Yes.
So I'm curious, what was the thing that you feel like maybe, if this resonates, have you experienced as well on your end? What has been something that you feel like maybe you focus maybe on the end goal of something, and how did you learn to enjoy maybe the process of gathering the
Me personally? So, oh man, that's a great question. I'll tell you, what's really wild about that thought process, right? And in the arc of my experience as a human being, I would say social media in my last 2 years was my first time really ever having that experience that you're talking
Mm-hmm.
about, because for the better part of my life, I have always been here, like wherever there is at that time, at that moment, that's where I am. And I thrived in that because of my consciousness. I'm that kid who, if I had been born just sometime later, I likely would be a completely different human being because of the amount of medication I'd have been given. I was so hyper attentive to what was going on in every moment all the time. It was like a squirrel. So that presented me with an opportunity to always be looking at what was there and trying to absorb what was around me and learn from it and use it and manipulate it, create it.
Mm-hmm.
So then fast forward to this latter part of my life, I'm using social media to share really vulnerable parts of myself. I pour more of my heart, spirit, and being into a project than I've ever done ever before. And I've spent weeks at a time not sleeping working on projects, but this was so different. And so I've done this thing and I'm using social media, and in the process of doing it, I lost a fraction of myself to the desire, to the goal of trying to position myself in a way that I could say that this was my career, so that this was like a driving engine to become a bigger thing to share. And now I'm talking about my philosophy, the choice forward philosophy. And man, in that process, I definitely found myself looking to the reward and not appreciating all of the things that needed to be done to get there. I mean, man, I've been in, like literally, I could list off accolades for what would be an hour, more accolades than I can actually even remember at this particular time that I've been given in the last 3 years. And so many of them did not feel like they were something I could truly appreciate it, because in that moment, I'm still looking at the fact that I've put myself in a position where now I have to be reaching forward. I have to be driving forward. I have to be going and pushing outward. And man, that dissonance, that chaos was something that I feel very blessed to have been able to address in the last few months,
Mm-hmm.
because truly it was starting to weigh on my psyche as I realized the more I'm trying to help, the more I have to question whether or not I'm actually being helpful. So I hope that you see what I'm saying in terms of like the parallels. It's not the same as foraging and it's not the same as gardening, but in terms of not focusing on that moment and looking out there more than you appreciate the moment. I had only ever done that in my life, even for a fraction of time, really, in the last little while. And I'm thankful that I realized it before it caught me in a spiral of, it caught me in a spiral and pushed me in a direction that I didn't desire.
Yeah. Definitely one of those things where, and maybe you said it's something that you've maybe only have experienced a fraction of as this age of social media. That's not something I necessarily put two and two together, and I'm not saying like own bad look good, but I quite wonder if it's something like that people maybe younger maybe experiencing of looking at more of the end goal and not being more present to be able to focus on the small things.
Oh,
I'm curious.
absolutely.
Hmm?
I think I think absolutely. And because I was this kind of a squirrel but I never had to deal with this kind of a box or the social pressures to say that like this box was essential to my actual ability to remain a part of society. I didn't have that pressure. So I look at the youth now in a way that I'm trying to encourage more of my peers and more of the adults who are older than me to do, to say, hey, look at what society has created as a precipice of understanding comes from this, not from this. That's not reality, right? And when you've done that, all of a sudden the person can't help but feel like the reward is going to come from here, from somewhere out there. There can never be enough to come from the plate that just comes from the yard. So that's definitely something that I've seen happening, where so many people get on social media and they're pushing and pushing and pushing with the desire and lose themselves and lose touch with their consciousness, with their present reality.
Yeah, and I've noticed like on some of the tours that I've done like this year, a lot of the people are an older demographic. There's very few, maybe a handful of people my age. So I'm curious as to in the future how I want to implement more people or like connect with people that's to a more younger audience who may feel like this is something that's inaccessible to them, or just knowledge period across the board, being able to find something out there to be able to they can build on.
Yeah, well, I think that in that light, right? Because I'm trying to do something very similar, and I hope that more people like us and Meriwether, Farm and Nick, people who are out there trying to encourage the next sets of generation to reprioritize nature and to start to see that the experiential learning that comes from being outside is critical to cognitive development, to just well-being in general. And so one of the things I think that all of us can do as we work on that is to encourage everyone to start more programs in their community, start more programs in their schools, to invite more people like ourselves to schools, to start to synergize the youth for this to be something that they care about. And this is why I think that that's so important. Not just for the fact that it's our future and the fact that it's nature and it just makes sense, but for the fact that if we can get the kids to care about outdoors more than just the knickknacks and the spinners and the fidgeties, then all of a sudden the corporations have to start to feed into it. All of a sudden marketing and publicity have to start feeding into it. We could literally, from the bottom, redesign how the top distributes wealth if we get children to care about outside of it.
I see what you. So it's like starting a wave of sort, if you will, of people doing that. This is a perspective I think is very positive to have, especially I think now there's a lot of like people are cynical about, oh, what's the point of doing anything? The corporations own everything. They're destroying land. All these things. It's like no. It's like
I here's and let me touch on that for a moment, because you know this is we're living in really harsh times. Yeah. And with the consciousness that we all have now, right? There's a lot more of us reading. There's a lot more of us praying and meditating. There's a lot more consciousness. But why is that consciousness not leading to more peace, balance, and harmony? Well, there is a weight and a pressure that many of us feel from the world. And the world, right, is our institutions. It's our taxes, our are things that we've created around us that we all have to pay for, our rent, our mortgages, all these things, right? That's the world. But when you spent time outside and you've spent time plucking something from the ground or having an apple in your hand from a tree, you recognize the world is one thing, but life is a whole nother thing. And so I try to explain, we created the world to make life better, but the world has gotten out of hand because the world now has its own engines of priority that say we need what we need, and we do not care about making life better anymore. The only reason the world exists is because of people, and the only reason the world can continue to thrive is because of people. People thinking that they have to keep feeding the world. So at a certain point, people have to stop, feed themselves, nurture their mind, their body, and their spirit, nurture each other. And all of a sudden, those same people do not have the same desire to feed the world. But here's the catch. If in their nurturing, they are not actively sharing kindness, patience, and positivity. Kindness, so they are conscious of their vibration and their voice. Patience, so they're being deliberate about what choices they make, and they are not rushing to react. They are thinking about things and acting systematically. Positivity, conscious that life always has solutions, but it requires a consciousness and an awareness. If we are always applying kindness, patience, and positivity to ourselves and each other as we build our mind, our body, and our spirit, we wind up with stronger communities. And when we have stronger communities, well, guess what? All of a sudden, we see what's wrong in the environment. We start addressing it right where we are. We don't need help to do that. And in doing that, right, we synergize one another. And all of a sudden, we start saying, well, hey, we will go change the world. But right now, we're not in a place to change the world. We don't have each other. We're not understanding or aware of our environment. And as such, we're disconnected from our own mind, body, and spirit. Our mental health, physical fitness, and spiritual awareness are low and poor on the grade scale of wellness. So when that continues to happen, well, the world can just continue to thrive without ever needing to give any of its energy back to life. So every one of us has the potential to change that when we start working on ourselves, when we start, again, sharing kindness, patience, and positivity with each other, again, recognizing that regardless of what is going on, we are filled with life. And life is resilient, right? Life is persistent. Life is incredibly adaptable. But many of us, again, aren't tapping into these incredibly essential forces within ourselves because we are distracted by the world.
Which is, it's so, and then feeling like you alone are able to change it, or because people think that they are a small cog in the bigger piece of it, they can't really do anything about it. It's like,
Yeah,
well,
but that's the catch, right? Rethink that process. Go and find an intricately made watch. Look at the gears and take out the smallest gear. Watch stops working. So we are as important as we allow ourselves to be, even the smallest one of us. Where have you placed yourself in the gear of your society? Truly, you have no pegs if you haven't worked on your mind, body, and spirit. But the moment you have, well, guess what? Things start to move.
wow. Sorry, I wish there's a lot of things to talk on that.
Well, I'm glad that you can ask me such a quality, thoughtful question. These things truly matter. And I know how many people are like, man, I'm just a little thing. And I'm like, I see that and I understand it. And at the same time, you are a superhero. We just have to unlock the superpower. And you're already going through enough pressure to create a diamond. At a certain point, you here need to simply flip the switch.
Mm-hmm. And I think another point that when we were talking about, oh crap, something that really stuck with me, we had the conversation the other day. What's the difference between education and instruction?
Mm-hmm.
Which I think is a really important part of it that goes into play. And I also think it's one of those things that it's not talked about enough in a way where people usually just see instruction as education, and that's the way that it needs to be done. And I'm curious to for us to go into that idea a little bit more, because it's really fascinating idea. It really changed my perspective about the way in which.
Awesome. Well, for the audience who isn't familiar with my philosophy, when I was in college, I started this thought process that we as human beings, as far as I had been seen in America, spend far too much time in school because by the standards of psychology, by a certain point, we've already reached a point where our minds aren't developing the same way. So why wouldn't we have exposed that many more people to multiple languages by that point? There's already a point that in between that time and another time that we're going through hormonal changes and this, that, and the other. Why wouldn't we have exposed each other to incredible amounts of vast wisdom at that point? But instead, we were memorizing things. And I was really good at memorizing things. So good, in fact, that I could fool people into thinking that, like, I knew whatever it was because all I needed to do was open the book, flash a couple things, and then boom, I could just do, and that was done. But the amount of times I passed the test and learned nothing started to bother me because there came a point where I was asked a question and I didn't know. And everybody standing there was like, well, dude, you're the smart kid. You're supposed to know. And I was like, oh, right. How many other smart kids don't know, but they passed all the tests? So I started thinking about this process and I started really analyzing it as I went through school, continued to be top of my class, but had decided that I would change my thought process and make sure I was absorbing information, not just crossing it, so I could regurgitate it. And that's what created the difference in my understanding and started to hone in on the philosophy of the words, right? Each one of us is a student of life. So when you're a student of life, you go about learning everywhere you are. But most of us don't see ourselves as students of life. We only see ourselves as students at school. So when you go to school and you're a student at school, how are you learning? Well, the thing is, teaching is connected to learning, right? So your teacher is supposed to be there to adapt themselves to make sure that you and them meet in a space so that it creates the environment where learning is the byproduct of the information shared. But instead, what we've decided is that we will insert a test to say we know what you know, and then we'll say we want you to know this. So we'll present this information to you, give you the test. That's how we know if you know it. Well, that's not learning. That's called instruction. Because instruction is just memorize this and give it back to me. I don't need to know whether or not you have actually absorbed or how you absorb material, whether it's auditory, visual, or experiential. So if I, as the teacher, don't actually care whether or not you learn in any of those multiple ways, I'm not really a teacher. I'm an instructor. By definition.
Yeah. And
by definition, this is not me being like, oh, you're a bad blood. No, by definition. So for me, let's just change the definition. Stop calling teachers teachers when you force them to instruct. That for me, that's where I'm like, oh man, just use the right words, right? Stop calling yourself a leader if all you do is manage. You're not a leader, you're a manager. And so start telling your people, I manage you, I don't lead you.
I have an interesting antidote to that as well. It'll be like a minute. It won't be too long. But I was talking to my a friend of mine about this, and they said I believe their sophomore or freshman year of high school, I had this teacher, or in this case, it was an instructor. This is a very extreme example of this. Who I believe it was a science. I believe they taught science. And in this case, they were going about their instruction route, and generally across the classroom, a lot of the students knew that they did not like the way that they instructed the class. They didn't really gain that much from it. They knew like some of the ways that she was outlining stuff was not generally across the class. The students knew, okay, this is not something we want to do. So my friend of mine decided to get a box together with suggestions. They got a toilet paper or a tissue box full of suggestions with things that the students feel could help the classroom and what they needed from her in order to feel like they could better understand the information. Which is not often, at least I think people don't think it's often reading that students will rally up and take the time and read kind suggestions. These weren't any rude.
Like I'm not just offering up thoughts because we are trying to learn. Okay, great.
So they do this. They have organized it over the couple, I think, a span of 2 days, and they leave the box on her desk. They leave it there just so she can come to it, and then she'd look at it. The teacher looked at it, picked it up, and then threw it away. She never acknowledged it. But it was a blatant refusal.
Practice. That's a very common, and in a lot of ways, the teachers will see that as some sign of insubordination or disrespect, because they're like, well, the years before you have done it. But this is a huge part of what is the problem with how we design the idea of the education system. Currently, it is not student-centered or student-centric. And so how can you pass a law or create a rubric for a child to come based on a child that was? Whoa, hold on. At what point did you actually go to the child that is? Oh, well, that child can't matter because we're so busy caught in the bureaucracy of what was and what will be. Woo! So when do we care about what is? We never do.
So
man, that's a wild state to be in, but that's like the state we've created. So that's why I'm like, oh man, all of that malarkey can get you really bogged down and you can get lost in that. So I don't even bother with that. I define words and do my best to make sure that I'm constantly working on my own peace, my own balance, and my ability to sustain harmony despite the dissonance or the chaos around me. And in doing so, again, you can permeate through the chaos. And as you do, the chaos shifts from being random notes and sharp off-pitch tones to being a part of the harmony and the symphony that you create. Slow and steady. And all of a sudden, those instruments start to come into tune. And now we have a voluminous orchestra that we can actually use to create sound.
And it's great seeing so many other educators. I think another good thing about this is that although it does have its issues, I think it is a great environment for you can find a teacher from anywhere who has the resources that you're looking for to be able to connect to and find it. you can find match with anyone depending on, you know, what things you're looking for online too.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that's why, you know, tool versus vice. You have to use the internet as a tool. Use social media as a tool. If you are not using it as a tool, it becomes a vice. And vices are destructive to you and your community. The only thing to keep social media and any of the internet from becoming a vice is you applying discipline and moderation to how you use it. That's what matters. So apply discipline and moderation, and you will stay in control, and you will watch yourself and others around you grow. And that also applies to the foraging, because you know what I mean? If all of a sudden you're like, oh my gosh, this thing's tasty, I'm just going to take all of it. How is that good for you, the plant, or community? It's not, right? Yeah. So that same plant, regardless of what the plant is or where it is a tool, a powerful tool, one that has got to be respected and appreciated.
Yeah, and I think something that can be related to both of those things, and I'm giving plants an example that was brought up, is this idea of we have a lot of like preserves, or people have, I think, two views of nature. Either they think that it's something that can be used and like over harvested or overused, or they have this perspective of we do not ourselves have a place in it, and that it should be protected and preserved, and we shouldn't be able to touch it in any way. Which both ideas are limiting, and there needs to be more of a perspective of being able to
interact with nature with consciousness,
yes,
and with forward movement of a relationship, not a parasitic one, but one that is symbiotic. We can interact with nature. We don't have, like, the amount of places that I that are like, oh no, everybody can't go there. It was like, well, that's not actually going to create any learning or appreciation for that space. So that's not what I think we should do. I don't think we should say everyone should go there, but to say no one should go there, well, that's very limiting. That's just as bad as being like, hey, now I own all 100 acres of this space. Well, who are you? And why did you buy it? Like, how did this even get sold? This doesn't even, like, what? And so in that light, I'm like, again, so many of these principles of barriers that we've created are effectively stunting the growth of society and the psyche of the human being. And so it's up to each of us to apply the discipline and the moderation ourselves, right? Because again, that's going to change the blanket statement. Right now, we have so many laws applied to a bottom denominator that those of us with any consciousness are really stifled from doing anything. And it's like, well, that's not fair. So in a way, we've got to go back to putting more earnest on the individual to be better, and not just saying, okay, I'm going to charge you $1,800 for a test to know that you're better. That's not fair either. So, you know what I mean? There's got to be a better balance of allowing someone's consciousness, someone's repertoire of experience and well-being to speak for themselves.
Mm-hmm.
Well, oh man, I don't know if you can hear that. Can you hear the little one in the background?
I can.
Yeah, well, Shane, it has been a pleasure and a half, my friend. Oh man, a pleasure and a half. So, please tell the audience where they can find you, what projects you have going on, anything you want to share with them that they should go look up and support you. How can they support your endeavors?
Well, really quick before I will say I did recently get your book, and I have read the first 7th of it. I'm like a 7th of the way in. Now I say that I will say this: our stories are weirdly, eerily the same in a lot of ways. Upbringing, so that's been very interesting to go through and read that. But it's so far it's been a great, interesting read. A lot of good talking points. So I do recommend
Awesome.
people.
Well, thank you very much. As I said earlier, How to Grow, Nurture Your Garden, Nurture Yourself. My very first book. It was the hardest thing I had ever done in my life at that point. And up until this point, next to my wife, it had been the most rewarding. But now that prize goes to my son. So thank you for that. I appreciate that, man. I'm really thankful to know you got the book and that you can see some of yourself in the book. When I looked at you, right, I was like, oh man, look at this young man reminding me of myself from many, many years ago. How different my life would be if I had grown up with media as a thing. What a different life it would have been. So thank you for that. I can't wait to rap about it and have some more conversations about what you're reading. So we'll be doing that here in the next few weeks, I imagine.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Looking forward to it. And then I am the big projects. I'm I guess I'm right. I do foraging stuff. I'm starting to do longer form content on YouTube to teach people more about foraging. It's still under the Wild Dryad. Longer foraging content, so more people can start learning about what's around them. And you don't need to know about the plants that are in your area. You can still pick up some things and just learn how to start focusing about the things that are around you. Not even necessarily how to know one plant in particular, but just get more familiar and used to being out in nature.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, thank you all so much for joining us. Thank you so much, Shane, for taking some time out of your morning to chat with me and to share some love, kindness, patience, and positivity with the audience. Please do me a solid and breathe with me as we send the audience away in peace. All right? Let's breathe. Hold that breath. And release. Excellent. Thank you all so much for joining me this morning and joining Shane, letting us have this great conversation with you. We will be seeing about reposting this later. So until the next time, everyone, I hope you have a blessed rest of your day.
Thank you. You all have a good rest of your day too, and happy Friday.
Thanks, man. Happy Friday, everybody. Woo! All righty, buddy. Peace.
You all have a good one.